When absolute power fused with theatrical cruelty, the Roman Empire gave rise to rulers whose brutality transcended mere governance. It became spectacle. These were not emperors who ruled with restraint or wisdom, but men who twisted authority into a tool of torment, forging an era where fear became law and torture, a language of dominance. Their violence was not hidden. It echoed through arenas, palaces, and the silent chambers of execution. What unfolded was not chaos, but a deliberate choreography of cruelty sanctioned by imperial decree. Nero's burning games, spectacles of fire and cruelty. To the citizens of Rome, Emperor Nero was not simply a ruler, he was a performance. But beneath the theatre and music, behind the statues and gold, lay one of the most disturbingly theatrical tyrannies in Roman history. Known as Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, his reign from 54 to 68 CE descended into infamy for spectacles of torment carried out not only as punishment, but as entertainment. In 64 CE, a fire swept through Rome. It burned for 9 days, destroying 3 of the city's 14 districts and damaging 7 more. While the cause remains uncertain, ancient sources such as Tacitus record widespread suspicion that Nero himself ordered the fire to clear space for his grand architectural vision, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. Whether or not he was responsible, Nero shifted blame to the Christians, a small and already maligned group in Roman society. What followed was not justice, but a display of cruelty that transformed executions into public theatre. Tacitus, writing in Annals 1544, describes how Christians were covered with the skins of beasts, torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt. One of Nero's most grotesque inventions was to cover victims in pitch and set them alight as living torches to illuminate his gardens at night. These human pyres were positioned among Rome's elite guests during Nero's evening festivities. Death turned into decor. The emperor's fascination with fire and pain was not limited to Christians. He was known to force senators and nobles to commit suicide, sometimes after elaborate psychological torment. His own mother, Agrippina the Younger, who had helped secure his rise, was eventually executed on his command, following a failed attempt to murder her by collapsing the ceiling over her bed and another involving a sabotage boat. Nero's cruelty operated on a scale that blurred the line between spectacle and state policy. His executions were not concealed behind palace walls, but displayed under the open sky, wrapped in music, laughter, and flame. Torture became not only a method of control, it became part of the imperial identity. And in that identity, Rome bore witness to a reign where fire did not just consume wood and stone, but dignity, mercy, and the very soul of governance. Caligula's inhumane acts, when laughter meant death. Known as Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, but remembered by history as Caligula, his short reign from 37 to 41 CE stands as one of the most infamous episodes in imperial Rome. Initially welcomed with optimism following the death of Tiberius, Caligula's early popularity evaporated rapidly, consumed by erratic cruelty, public humiliation, and a regime of theatrical violence that turned death into farce. According to Suetonius in the 12 Caesars, Caligula once said, "Let them hate me so long as they fear me." Whether these exact words were spoken or not, they capture the underlying essence of his rule. Fear was not a byproduct, it was a deliberate mechanism. Under Caligula, mockery and murder intertwined, and laughter often signaled the beginning of someone's end. He delighted in testing loyalty through impossible choices. Senators were summoned only to be insulted publicly or accused of treason based on invented offences. Trials were held where the outcome was already determined, and spectators often included the emperor himself. laughing, jeering, or applauding as sentences of death were pronounced. Executions were conducted not as legal consequences, but as performances. As Cassius Dio recorded, Caligula would sometimes order a man's death during dinner, then have the body dragged away as guests continued their meal. He is said to have enjoyed the spectacle of suffering to such a degree that during games, when there was a lull in the action, he would order entire sections of the audience thrown into the arena to be torn apart by beasts simply to keep the blood flowing. Even women of the highest status were not immune to Caligula's tyranny. He targeted the families of Rome's elite, subjecting senators' wives and daughters to degrading treatment, then ridiculing their husbands in the halls of power. Under Caligula, laughter no longer meant joy. It became a warning, a sound that echoed through Rome's palaces and arenas as a signal that someone, somewhere, had been marked for pain. His reign collapsed in just 4 years, ended by his own guards. But in that brief time, he had shown how absolute power, once twisted by whim and cruelty, could turn laughter itself into an instrument of terror. Domitian's silent rooms, torture without witnesses. Reigning from 81 to 96 CE, Domitian, formerly known as Titus Flavius Domitianus, presided over a Roman Empire marked by rigid control, enforced silence, and concealed brutality. Unlike the flamboyant cruelty of Nero or the theatrical madness of Caligula, Domitian's reign was colder, more methodical. His violence was rarely public. It was carried out behind closed doors, precise, clinical, and often invisible to those not directly targeted. Ancient sources, particularly Suetonius and Tacitus, describe an atmosphere of suffocating fear. Domitian revived and expanded laws of maiestas, treason, not to protect the state, but to weaponize accusation itself. Under his rule, words, gestures, or even silence could be construed as disloyalty. A sideways glance, an unfinished sentence, or a name spoken in the wrong tone might end in interrogation, imprisonment, or worse. It was not merely about eliminating enemies, it was about dissolving trust between citizens. Domitian's preferred tool was not the arena, but the chamber. He employed a corps of secret informants, delatores, who thrived in an environment where accusation was rewarded with favor and silence could cost one's life. Torture was not reserved for slaves, as Roman law typically dictated. Under Domitian, even nobles and senators were subjected to questioning under physical duress. His private interrogation rooms, never named officially but alluded to by later writers, became spaces of systemic cruelty where voices were extinguished and confessions extracted not through justice but through fear. Pliny the Younger, writing after Domitian's death, referred to the era as one in which informers swarmed and no man dared to speak his thoughts. The emperor's palaces became symbolic of his rule, ornate, expansive, and terrifyingly quiet. Executions were often unannounced. Victims vanished into silence, their properties seized, their names erased. Public trials were rare. Punishment was dealt swiftly and without audience. He projected control even over time and language. Domitian insisted on being addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, a demand that reflects not theatrical vanity, but a calculated erosion of republican traditions. The Senate, once a body of deliberation, had become ceremonial. Its members lived not by law, but by Domitian's permission. By the time of his assassination in 96 CE, carried out by palace officials and even his own wife's complicity, Rome had grown weary of the silence. The Senate condemned his memory, a formal damnatio memoriae, and his statues were destroyed or defaced. Yet the imprint of his governance remained. Domitian did not shout his cruelty from balconies, he buried it in marble corridors and sealed rooms. His legacy is not marked by spectacle, but by the chilling reminder that fear does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and no one dares to answer. Commodus's arena reign, Emperorship turned Gladiator Bloodsport. Officially known as Lucius Aurelius Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, Commodus ruled from 180 to 192 CE. His accession marked a sharp departure from the philosophical leadership of his father. Commodus did not seek to uphold the image of the virtuous Roman ruler. Instead, he dismantled it, transforming the imperial court into a personal stage and the empire itself into an extension of his ego. No longer was cruelty a tool of secrecy or political enforcement. Under Commodus, it became performance, and the emperor stood center stage. Commodus's obsession with the gladiatorial arena was not symbolic, it was literal. He entered the Colosseum dressed as a gladiator, armed not with authority, but with weapons. Ancient sources, including Cassius Dio, record that Commodus claimed to have fought and killed hundreds of opponents in the arena. In truth, these battles were often orchestrated. His opponents were wounded, unarmed, or simply ordered to submit. But the emperor's appetite for domination was not satisfied by victory. He craved spectacle. He once slaughtered dozens of exotic animals in a single day, including lions, ostriches, and even a giraffe. Actions meant not for defense, but for amusement. What made his reign distinct was not only that he killed, but that he turned state violence into personal gratification. Roman citizens were forced to watch as their emperor mocked the sacred space of the arena, renaming months after his own titles, and even referring to himself as the Roman Hercules. Those who criticized his behavior, whether openly or by implication, were swiftly removed, often executed. One senator who laughed during an arena performance was later found dead. Under Commodus, even amusement became a dangerous risk. When he was finally assassinated in 192 CE, strangled by a wrestler acting on the orders of his inner circle, the relief within the Senate was immediate. But Rome had already witnessed the transformation of its highest office into a spectacle of violence, and its emperor into a performer of death. Under Commodus, cruelty did not hide behind law nor whisper through chambers. It walked openly into the arena and demanded applause. The reigns of Nero, Caligula, Domitian, and Commodus were not isolated descents into cruelty. They were imperial expressions of unchecked power, where governance collapsed into domination and human life was reduced to spectacle. These emperors did not merely rule Rome, they reshaped its moral core, weaponizing fear, silence, and death. Their legacies reveal how authority, when divorced from restraint, devours the very foundations of civilization. What does their reign reveal about the psychological impact of absolute power in imperial systems? Comment below. As Tacitus wrote of Nero's